Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Ethel Rubin. We're going to be starting with an introduction of our little fireside chat. I wanted to thank John Sullivan as soon as he joins and Anthony Sala for joining me today. We're going to talk a little bit about what you do next, right? You've got your funding. Now, what are you going to do next?
Here he is, I think.
Okay, great. John is on. Okay, great. Let's get him on video. But we plan to make this interactive. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen on Zoom so that as we go along some of the topics we're going to be discussing today that you saw in the description of the session, you can ask us questions and we'll stop and try to answer them. We're also going to leave plenty of time at the end to hear from you what's on your mind regarding commercialization or next steps.
Great. So yes, I want to welcome Anthony Sala, Ethel Rubin, John Sullivan. Ethel's going to help everybody introduce him and herself. But while Ethel and John are listed as being entrepreneurs in residence with BioHealth Innovation, which we're very fortunate they are, they wear a couple different hats that you'll learn about in a minute. And all three of these folks have a lot of industry experience. So I know that you'll find their conversation helpful. This is part of our non-dilutive funding workshop. They have all been actively involved on different sides of the fence at non-dilutive funding companies who have first raised non-dilutive funding, and they'll talk about this. So we think you'll find it helpful. Again, a shout out to Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and BioHealth Innovation for hosting this seminar. And take it away, Ethel. I'll monitor the chat for you.
Okay, wonderful. So the reason that we're here is that we're assuming you got your grant. That's fantastic. If it's a phase 1 grant, you got a little bit of money to do R&D for your product. If you've got a little bit more money, you've got some pathway towards product development, and that's fantastic. But we all know it's going to take more than a phase 1 grant or even a phase 2 grant to get to a significant commercial inflection point, let alone all the way through to commercialization, depending on your technology. And in fact, if you've got a phase 1 grant and you plan to apply to a phase 2 grant, you're going to need to have that path to commercialization pretty much set. Your grant application will require, as you must have heard from our earlier presenters yesterday from the NIH, that you will need a commercialization plan. That will include a go-to-market strategy, an understanding of the market that you're going after, who your customers are, what the size of the market is, what the competitive landscape is like, and how you fit into it. The different resources that you're going to need to build out the expertise in your company is going to be very important. You're going to have an understanding of the team that's going to be required to execute on the phase 2 grant. So there are a lot of things that will come later, even after you got your grant. And that's why we're here today. And we're going to start off with some introductions. Anthony, why don't you start and give a few minutes for John to join us?
Hi, thanks, Ethel. My name is Anthony Sala, CEO of Miracule. Miracule is an RNA therapeutics company. My background, I'm an RNA chemist. I used to be a scientist at National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, and the technology that underlies Miracule actually was developed there, and I worked on that before eventually founding Miracule. And the way that our platform works and the work we did in collaboration with NIH, first initially as part of at NIH, and then collaboration as event, data analysis and genomics methods to analyze genomic data and identify mutations that associate with patients' disease and a specific subset of patients, and then design an RNA therapeutic to target that. We did a lot of that work in conjunction with the Tumor Genome Atlas, which is a huge initiative by NIH to understand the genomics of patients with cancer, and then hopefully utilize that data to find better treatments for them. We founded Miracule back in 2016. And at that time, I was just coming out of NIH. I was lucky enough to meet Rich Bendis and some of the other EIRs at BHI. And I was really interested in founding a company, really didn't know how to do that, didn't have that experience. And they helped me get organized, but then also gave me a chance to run another company and help build a subsidiary of another company, Memetis, which is here in the county. I was the first employee in the US. We grew that to 7 people today, and they're doing multi-million dollars revenue every year, which was great. In the meantime, we applied for SBIRs and we kind of started organizing and building the team. For Miracule, we won our first SBIR in 2017. Then we were able to utilize that grant to kind of validate the technology, get good proof of concept data, win a phase 2 SBIR in 2019, and raise our first private investment round, matching that for a couple $1 million. So to date today, we've won 3 SBIRs in the company, raised about $4 million in private investment, and it's all kind of building on that momentum where we started. We spun the technology out of university locally and took advantage of local programs and that SBIR program to build what today is a rapidly growing company in Montgomery County.
Congratulations, that's amazing. John, how about a few-minute introduction from you?
Yeah, hey, thanks very much. I can't see my own video. Hope you guys see me okay. Is that correct? Great. So yeah, my background, I've been in healthcare innovation my entire career. And I've actually been able to see it from a lot of different perspectives and sectors. I started off academically. I was an engineer undergrad and MBA from Stanford. Before business school, I actually started off in over-the-counter medicines with marketing Tylenol with J&J. And after business school, I left and joined Boston Scientific in their new product development group. They're a medical device company, and I worked on the cardiovascular side with them, launching their first coronary stent globally. Then I left to become an entrepreneur. So, like Anthony, I started off trying my way in the entrepreneurial world. And we spun some technology out of Yale University with a suite of molecular amplification tools. We raised about 60 million plus in venture capital money. We grew it to 100 employees or so, and eventually, and had the ups and downs of a typical startup. But were able to sell the company to QIAGEN, which is a global life sciences company, but they do have U.S. headquarters just up the road in Germantown, Maryland. So after selling that company, I joined a venture capital firm and became a venture capitalist with a company called Foundation Medical Partners, about 200 million under management, mostly medical device investments, but a little bit of healthcare IT, some biopharma, mostly Series A investments, and about a third of our money came from the Cleveland Clinic. So it was a really nice strategic partnership to kind of get their viewpoint on a lot of these emerging technologies in different therapeutic areas. I decided to return to industry, and I was recruited to join Cardinal Health, which is a big, Fortune 20 company, and I led strategy and M&A for their pharma business. Really great perspective of understanding more from an acquirer's point of view, what they're looking for in acquiring businesses. So it was really helpful perspective to get. But the NIH I joined about 2 years ago to return back to sort of more the entrepreneurial roots, help their companies. They invest, as you've heard a lot throughout today and yesterday, in these entrepreneurial companies, over 1,300 companies every year, and really helping to support those companies with business strategy, product development, and just general corporate strategy. And so I've been doing that the last 2 years, and pleased to be here and part of the panel.
Thank you so much, John. John and I work very closely together. We're both entrepreneurs in residence for biohealth innovation and spend most of our time with NIH and the companies that NIH backs with their SBIR and STTR dollars. So hopefully you'll be able to join our portfolio soon. We wish you the best of luck with that. For myself, I work again with the portfolio with NIH. We're senior advisors there. We work to prepare and connect companies with capital. I've been doing that for the past 2.5 years. And prior to that, I left my corporate life at Medtronic to go to the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, which had a very fascinating program called the NIH Centers for Accelerated Innovation to provide pre-seed funding for assets coming out of academic consortia in 3 places, in Boston, in Cleveland, and in California. Those assets got a little bit of money from NIH with a 1-to-1 match locally, and have gone on to spin out over 40 companies that have gone on to raise or exit for 700 million and counting. So it was a very successful program that is continuing in a slightly different manner now. As I mentioned, I left my corporate life a few years ago. My last position at Medtronic, I led global clinical strategy for one of their fastest growing business units. It was a lot of fun around the world where I sprinkled money. They know me very well associated with this technology. Before that, I had my own consulting firm where I primarily did search and evaluate for large global strategics as well as VC funds. And I've also had entrepreneurial experience. So both John and I have had experience signing checks as well as asking for money and going out there to raise money for our companies. My first entrepreneurial venture, I joined as probably the fourth or fifth employee for a company called Biofortis, which was then in Baltimore. Later we moved to Columbia, Maryland, and we sold that company a few years ago. A very successful venture. It took a long time to incubate, long time to raise and grow up, but we were doing something that nobody had ever done before. And that was an amazing experience for me. And then I had done another medtech device also in Baltimore. I'm a breast cancer researcher by training. I did a fellowship in the breast cancer research program at Johns Hopkins. John and I cover all technologies, every type of therapeutic modality, devices, diagnostics, digital health, research tools, process development tools, etc. So we're really excited to be here with you today. And like I said, we want this to be interactive. So when you have questions, just hit the Q&A button. And we're just going to chat among ourselves because this is a very important concept that you have to plan for next steps. And I wanted to start off talking about one of the things that entrepreneurs will hear about is advisors, the importance of surrounding yourself with advisors and all these kinds of advisory boards. So John and Anthony, let's talk a little bit about who these advisors are, what these advisory boards are supposed to be doing. Do I need advisory boards? What kind of advisory boards do I need? How do you compensate these people who agree to work for you as an advisor, not as an employee? Anthony, why don't you start off? Do you have an advisory board in your company?
Yeah, I have 3 advisory boards in the company. I have a business advisory board. I mean, there's the actual board for the company, which overlaps with the business advisory board, where we talk about business strategy, kind of strategic development of the company. And
so that's your corporate board of directors, right?
in addition, they overlap, but I have a separate business advisory board. I have separate meetings between the corporate board meetings and the business advisory board meeting. So we have the business advisory meeting first, kind of help us set the strategy and talk through things, and then we present to the board officially. We also have a scientific advisory board, which is a little more informal in our company. Sometimes they're more formal, but it's a lot of people that I call up and we have meetings, but it's a lot of just ad hoc advice. And then we have clinical advisory board that kind of functions the same way. And I think as we get closer to the clinic and other things, those will become more formal meetings that we have. Most of those people came from our network, from the startup. And so they were people that we knew already or were introduced to through our network. Like to give you an example, I had an academic collaborator, KOL in the RNA therapeutic space, microRNA therapeutic space, and he introduced me to the CSO of the first microRNA therapeutics company. Great addition to my board. And initially, when I was building those, the compensation was stock options for everyone. We didn't have a lot of money. We were putting together, the demand wasn't very high, and we were able to just offer people stock options on the company. And because most of the time we were approaching people kind of friendly and through our network, they were willing to help us without being paid. As we got funding, we did offer payment to some of our advisors, and especially for our academic collaborators who have conflict of interest policies. Sometimes they cannot accept stock. They have to only receive like consulting income. So we'll put them on a grant, or we'll put them, as a consultant that's approved by their institution. You have to go through ethics rules and things like that. But for the most part, my first advisors all came from our network, and they were all compensated with stock options in the company. which takes a little bit of money to put together with a good attorney, but you know, that way everyone has something they get out of it for helping you and giving you good advice.
And I think just to sort of point out, sort of building on what Anthony was saying, like it's you know, you can see by how Anthony's structuring his advisory boards is, you know, in key strategic important areas for the company. So from a business perspective, you really want to make sure you have the right business model, you understand the markets, you're structuring the business in the right way, and you have the right incentives to succeed. And you know, but then there's the technical side, right? So you know, how you develop the product, whether it's the science on the biopharma or the engineering side on the medical device, you know, or digital health. And there's certainly the clinical side too. A lot of people have clinical advisory boards where they really want to understand, all right, once this gets out, you know, from a clinical perspective, how does this compare to other competitive, you know, alternatives that, you know, might be used in the marketplace, and how do you position it to physicians or end users or patients? So, you know, those are the advisory boards. You know, it's important, I think, to point out what the purpose or the function of an advisory board is, you know, at this point, which is, and it's multifactorial. So one side is making sure you're helping to make the right decisions. So, you know, the advice around, you know, how you make these important decisions that are going to, you know, be really important to the future success of the company. But it's also, I think Anthony mentioned this as well, networking, introductions, you know, to other key people that can really help your company grow, funding sources. And, you know, and last, I'd say these are people who are going to be with your company for the longer term. It's not just people you bring in for advice, you know, like a consultant, you know, who comes in and, you know, maybe places some advice and leaves. This is someone who believes in your company, understands the, you know, the positives and the trade-offs and challenges of the company, and you can be there for you. And the last thing I'll point out from a function standpoint is validation. These are, you know, senior people in the industry, clinical, technical, business, who can vouch for your company, write letters of recommendations. You know, they're really important. Ethel talked about commercial plans. You know, those letters of support or having those business advisors is a nice stamp of approval that can help you succeed in those other ways of raising funding or getting future grants.
Thank you. So the question comes down to compensation. And this comes up very often. What's normal for board of directors? What's normal for advisory board? So Anthony, we don't want you to tell us and divulge something that's highly confidential, but let's talk ranges. John and I see hundreds of companies a year, and we pretty much have benchmarked what the types of compensation are. But Anthony, from your perspective, what is normal?
I mean, it depends on the role that people play, how committed they are. I would recommend not working that out until you start working with them a little bit, because you have people who you might list as an advisor, but don't respond to you, don't offer as much support. You may still want to keep them clued in because you need them later, versus people that really come in and do work for you, right? And you want to kind of view those differently and negotiate it individually with each person as they meet your needs. But the short answer is not very much in the overall picture of things. You know, you only have so much equity, and if you give away too much, there's not enough to go around, and dilution becomes too difficult. So I think you have to really plan out a little bit how you're giving out equity, and where, you know, what's the structure of your team and your founders, how much is someone contributing, and you know, but you have to protect that, because a lot of times people give away too much early on, and that becomes difficult later down the road. But yes, so it's not so much about the percentage; it's about, you know, kind of, you know, the numbers and kind of modeling that out a little bit with your advisors, you know, to how you want to structure that.
John, we've seen hundreds of companies. What would you say are good benchmarks?
No, I agree with Anthony. I think it's, you know, it's hard to have a rule of thumb. You know, like I like how Anthony phrased it in the sense of, you know, it's not going to be like a co-founder or someone who's full time with your company, right? Like who's, you know, there, you know, many hours a week working side by side with you. You know, it goes back to a risk trade-off. You know, you want to compensate them and give them upside for being that long-term partner. But, you know, if it's in the sub 1%, you know, 0.5, 0.1 up to 1%, 2% for real senior advisors who are going to be there, you know, really rolling up their sleeves. It's, you know, it's a wide range. And as Anthony kind of points out, it's more an art than a science. And I do want to actually emphasize another thing Anthony said that I thought was really astute, which is don't, immediately jump into bed with these partners where you're like, they're an advisor, here's a big equity agreement. Because as I mentioned earlier, they're a long-term partner, right? So they're not just a consultant you're bringing in. So I liked how Anthony sort of phrased it, which is, it's like a trial period almost. Get to know them, give them some projects, see if you like them, because these are people you're gonna have to interact with on a weekly basis, really regular, and you have to trust them. You have to have a good communication style. They have to share sort of the values of the company and really, be strong supporters, people you like to work with. And that's why sort of try before you buy, sort of work with them first, and then you can enter into those, more substantive equity agreements.
So that's great advice. I want to point out to the attendees that there's a fantastic resource in the Founders Institute. So if you go to the Founders Institute website, they have templates for advisory agreements, advisors to the founder or mentors to the founder. They have all sorts of agreements there, and they do have a table of what expected equity or what normal benchmarks are for equity compensation for advisors depending on the stage of your company. It also depends very much on the type of company. Life science is different than tech. Life science takes a lot longer. You're not likely to get to an exit in 2 or 3 years, whereas tech can go any which way. So that is a fantastic resource, and you can see what some of the benchmarks are there. The other thing I wanted to advise you when you're bringing on advisors is get an idea of expectations from them. If the first question they have is how much time is this going to, how much of a time allotment or time commitment is this, that tells you that they're going to be sensitive to that. So, maybe you're going to have an advisory board that meets quarterly, which is very different than advisors who you meet with weekly, or somebody who's literally sitting at the right hand of the CEO to bring up this company and eventually chair the board of directors when they're ready for one. So these are all very, very different. If they are experienced advisors, they'll have a good sense of what it would take to get them on board. I could tell you from having seen hundreds of companies and different kinds of advisors, there are some advisors who will never work for just equity compensation. There are some that are going to require cash, even on a scientific advisory board. I'm not going to tell you what Bob Langer costs, but it's not going to be just equity. So it really depends on who you're going after. And the one thing I think that protects you a little bit about giving away something that might not be worth it because that person or advisor that you're bringing on board is really not contributing. We've seen a lot of advisory agreements with cliffs. So cliff means that their first tranche of equity does not even vest until, let's say, working with you for 6 months. And I think that should protect you a little bit. I don't know if you've used that, Anthony, in your agreements, but that's something that I see pretty commonly.
Usually not. So all of our employee equity agreements have a cliff, right? But for advisors, usually we haven't established equity agreement until we're working together for a few months. So I don't feel like there's a need for a cliff. And I would say also, Ethel, like for when you're first starting out, if an advisor asks you for cash, they're probably not the right advisor at that stage. They may be a good advisor later on, right? But they should understand that you're building the company, you haven't raised money yet, you're going out, you're getting grants, maybe you have a grant, you may not have cash to offer them unless they're contributing to that grant project. I think it's always a good idea. It helps you build the team so much better to have strong academic KOL actually contributing to the research that you're doing in your SBIR, like validating some of the experiments that are critical, or performing an animal model that their group is an expert on, or there's all sorts of ways to work with great academic labs, and that's a great way to start the relationship. If they work with you well, they deliver on their end of the research, they're going to be a good long-term partner for the company, and they're going to join your scientific advisory board. And then based on their situation, that's the kind of time when you bring them in as an official advisor for the company or joins.
Great point.
I second that strongly. I think it's, Anthony pointed out, it's the relationship, right? And that you want to have those shared values. And if they're asking for a ton of cash, they may not understand the entrepreneurial need to conserve cash at all costs. It's all about investing in the business and growing the company at that early stage. And if maybe later on, as Anthony, let's say you do a a $50 million raise, or you're more in the Series C, Series D, then it's more cash compensation. You have some money to invest in top tier advisors. You're getting closer to the public markets, maybe a little more flashy on the advisor side. But the early stage, you want someone who really shares your perspectives, your values, understands how a cash-starved entrepreneurial company is, and that's so critical to having those shared focus areas and perspective values.
Good points. We got a couple of questions regarding where those templates are. It's called the Founders Institute. So I think it's fi.org, or just look up Google the Founders Institute. There are a number of different agreements there. There are all sorts of other templates you can find from other websites. I just happened to have looked at one saying, oh, this is perfect, neat and clean, one page. And then another question regarding the cliff: do you compensate advisors during that trial period? A cliff means they already have an agreement in place, but the agreement includes a cliff, which means that their first, let's say you're giving them 0.5% of your company over 4 years. That means in year one, or they should get 0.25%, but that even the initial portion of that does not vest until after they've worked with you for 1 quarter or 2 quarters. So you just put in a cliff, or maybe a whole year that that 0.25%. Others will negotiate back or want to change that. I mean, you'll have to work it out with your advisors, what their expectations are. Are they okay with the cliff? Do they even want to be with you for a 4-year period? So these are all things that you have to work out and negotiate one-on-one with your advisors. And the more experienced advisors will totally get it. They've done this before. This isn't the first time that they're working on an advisory agreement. We got another question about are there any resources that can help us put together an options agreement that we can extend to potential advisors? I think you're talking about the advisory agreement. Again, take a look at that at Founders Institute or other websites.
I can chime in on this one. I would not recommend form agreements for options agreements. I think that's one of the cases where you just spend the money on the legal fees and get something that's fit for purpose for your company. And you should have separate options agreements and advisor agreements. There are just so many legal regulations around options, and you really have to think about how the options affect the person. It's a very complicated area. You'll learn a lot, but you need a professional advisor. It's going to cost you a few $1,000s to put together your first option agreement. Then each one will be much cheaper after you do that first one. But I really think it's worth the cost early on in the company.
You're talking about legal fees. You want a lawyer to help you put this together.
I think there's tax implications for everyone involved and legal implications for you and the company. And this is one of the things that you don't. The advisor agreement itself, I think you can use a form agreement, but for the stock options themselves, and they're important to investors, how they're structured. Investors look at those very carefully, and if your option agreements are not in order, they're gonna see you as naive and not understanding what you're doing. And so that's one of the things I think is really important to spend money on.
I think the legal team can really help you as well with valuation and tax issues that are associated with it. They can provide other good advice there to sort of understand like how to mark to market and what your last financing round might have been, as well as like how that impacts the tax, and it might be option agreements, it might be restricted stock depending on like how you want to sort of structure them. So it's I agree with Anthony. It's definitely, that's an area you want to invest in on the legal perspective.
Good. And there's plenty of great law firms around here who are very experienced in working with life science early stage startups. Some of the very well knowns: Wilson Sonsini, WSGR, DLA Piper. We've got plenty that we can recommend. So it's important to work with a lawyer who understands what stage of company you are and what kind of company you are. So I think that's all good. Let's move on a little bit to commercial resources. If you're going to do a phase 2 grant, as I mentioned, you're going to have to identify the size of your market, your go-to-market strategy, the competitive landscape, how you protect yourself, creating a moat around your technology, pricing, reimbursement, regulatory. It's going to take a lot to figure this out, and you don't have $5,000 to spend on 2 or 3 market research reports. What resources are there for entrepreneurs to get access to different kinds of things that can help them plan for this and to help them plan their business strategy. Anthony, what did you use? Let's just start. You've done this, right? 2 or 3 times. What did you use?
So in my first company, Memetis, we did this research largely ourselves. We sat down at the biotech, the commerce at the time. I think this is probably going to come back after the pandemic. They had a series of market research databases that you could access at their terminal. So you go to their site in Baltimore in the World Trade Center. They used to have one at the Germantown Incubation Center. And we downloaded every market research report we could find on our area, and we did and then we were lucky enough that we already had some customers in pharmaceutical companies between when we won our phase 1 and our phase 2. So we kind of talked to them and did some research, and they connected with people. So we probably talked to about 10 or 20 people and built a pretty good commercialization plan from our phase 1 to our phase 2. In our second company, in Miracule, when we won our grant in Miracule, we were lucky enough to participate in the I-Corps program, which is funded by NIH. And so we wrote a supplement to our grant, and people can probably contact their program administrators to see if they're eligible that with an NSF or an NIH grant. And they paid for our tuition for the I-Corps program, and then gave us time, like to supplement our salaries, to spend time on the program. And so we interviewed 50 physicians that were in the indications for our first drugs. We interviewed manufacturing partners. We interviewed, potential pharmaceutical company business development people. And we really built, I think, a really strong, we had a plan like kind of in mind. We made it way, way stronger as far as how we were going to approach clinical development, how are we going to approach, marketing, how are we going to structure our license agreement. If we license or co-develop, we were able to kind of like walk through a lot of those scenarios with people that were willing to kind of give us an hour of their time in the I-Corps program. And really that was the basis for writing our phase 2 grant. And we got a lot of really great feedback from the reviewers, on that first initial commercialization plan.
I think that's a great summary of, and you can see it as a great example of the importance of doing a broad-based, with lots of decision makers, market research assessment, the assessment of the market. And I think this is an area where a lot of startup companies fall short. I think they start with the technology, they're in love with the technology, and they forget about the market and how important it is to make the right decisions. A lot of people buy a market research report and they're like, we're going after the diabetes market, or we're going after the cardiovascular market. And, and then they say it's $1 trillion market and we're going to get, 1% of $1 trillion market and see it's that, and they think they're done, so they wipe their hands of it. I think what Anthony sort of just laid out, I think it's really a great example of doing your homework in a variety of ways. So he mentioned several sources. He talked about secondary market research, which is where you get reports, other people have done the work. You collect from a variety of sources, especially free if you can get them from economic development houses and others. But I think people also lose sight of the fact that you can do a lot of primary market research where you really go out and you talk one-on-one with customers, manufacturers, business development people, as Anthony mentioned. Another is, that I found really effective, people who have been in business in that industry, in the past. I was doing some market research a few months ago about a remote patient monitoring business. And it seemed really easy to use these current codes that are out there in the marketplace. And everybody in the business plan says, oh, we just use these codes, they already exist. But when you talk to a business owner who's raised venture capital and has struggled to sort of get people to pay for those codes and get physician partners to actually bill for those codes in the right way and connect them to their electronic management system, you realize it's not just as easy as reading a market research report and saying the codes exist. What Anthony, sort of laid out is you really have to know your market. A lot of people talk about bench to bedside, and I would sort of flip it on its head and say you should go bedside to bench. Start at the bedside. Start at the decision making by the physician. Start at the market, the decision makers, the influencers, the manufacturers, who you're competing against, and know those really, really well, not just what you read from a market research report, because that will make or break the success of the company. You know, I think there's a lot of resources to do that, and a lot of your advisors can help with that as well. And I think it's just critical to success.
I'm laughing a little bit because when I was doing this for our own company, we used to actually approach salespeople, like the competitor salespeople or salespeople who sell these kinds of products to our customer base. And they're wonderful. You take them out for a beer, they tell you all sorts of things. So I think it's all really fantastic advice. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars. We've thankfully got great resources here in Maryland. I think both NIH and NSF have the I-Corps program. So that is fantastic that we have this. And again, it's free, and you actually get money to participate, and to, you know, you learn a tremendous amount from doing it. Now we're going to shift a little bit about, you know, when we think about NIH grants, the complaint is that it's not enough to complete your product, right? It's not enough to complete product development. It may not even be enough to get you to a significant inflection point, like an IND filing or your phase 1 clinical trial. So let's talk a little bit about private investment. You know, John, you and I talk to investors all day long. We've both been investors, and you actually were a VC, but you were one of the nice ones. And let's talk a little bit about, how do you know when you need to go for private investment? And if you do need a private investment, what kinds of investors are out there, and how you find them, and how you get introductions to them?
Yeah, so, you know, it's a really important question. I think, you know, a lot of people start off properly with non-dilutive funds, you know, to sort of to achieve some, you know, very important milestones, de-risk the company in some way, understand the science. But again, it gets to a point where, you know, depending on the goals of the corporation and what you want to achieve, if you really want to grow and go after a really big market, that's going to have a very, like a hockey stick type of inflection point, you're going to need capital to do that, to invest in the company, to bring the people in, the equipment, the real estate. And so the type of capital you look for that, there's a whole, you know, variety of capital out there. There's, you know, seed capital there, you know, which is like in the few $100,000 to $1 million, you know, maybe $1 million plus kind of range on seed. That can be given to you by angel capital investors, or even family offices who kind of bridge from around the seed investments, you know, maybe early into Series A. But once you get into sort of the $5-10 million plus range, now you're talking venture capital investors. And, you know, one thing I like to point out when people think of investors is, it's not unlike, you know, marketing your product and understanding the market for your product. There's a market for capital out there, and you have to position your company and your product so it's the right fit for the right investor. So I would say, just like we talked about doing your homework for your market, and understand your market, really do your homework and understand the investors you're talking to, understand what sectors they're interested in, understanding what their typical check size is, understanding how well they support their companies, because they are going to be a long-term supporter of your company, and it's a partnership. Like, they're going to be investing in your company for 3 to 7 to, you know, some, you know, it can take even longer to be part of that company. So I would get to know, you know, the investors you're reaching out to, understand the market of capital that's there, understand and really, you know, the market research we talked about before is going to be really important to prove your credibility and, you know, validate yourself with those investors. Maybe that's what you should be doing first, so that when you do approach sort of the more later stage investors or the venture investors, you know, you really have done your homework. I think Anthony mentioned that as well. And the last thing I'll say is, do not get discouraged. It is a numbers game. There are a lot of skeptical, you know, Ethel said I was a nice VC, you know, but it's like, because there's some ones out there that are, you know, not so nice, but there's, you know, they're most part, they're just trying to do their job, which is to sort of say, hey, you know, they have hundreds of business plans they see on a regular basis, and they only make a few investments a year in some of these firms. So you're going to get a lot of no's. And that's why I said, you know, do your homework, understand the VC, the types of investments they make, go on their websites, network in. Warm introductions are always better than cold introductions. So if you know somebody who knows that firm, that can always help as well to put your best foot forward.
There are a couple of resources that I've made available for the entrepreneurs that I work with, because we get asked these questions all the time. On my LinkedIn page, you're going to see some articles that I posted on market research. It's called digging into the trenches, or market research from the trenches, digging deep, market research from the trenches. That's it. For investor pitches, there is an article called 8 is Great. NIH gives this to all our companies that are selected for investment conferences. And there's another article called 6 Degrees of Separation, of creative and clever ideas of getting warm introductions to investors. But Anthony, you've just been out there doing this, and you raised $4 million of dilutive capital from private investors. Ironically, COVID-19 has made our sector hot. So it's, for someone who's gone through the at least 2 biotech downturns in my professional career, you tell us, how easy was it? Did you really have to kiss 300 frogs to find your princes, which is what we often advise, not to get too discouraged. What was it like?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you kind of our story. So the first money we raised was after phase 1, and it came from friends and family. The founders, it was a friends family fool around, and we actually wanted to go out and raise money from angels first. We didn't get a lot of hits there, and we started to need capital to push things forward, and we decided that that we would put the money in ourselves. And actually, after that happened, many of the people who we were talking to as angel investors, a few months later, we came back and they said, what have you been up to? And we said, well, we were able to meet some milestones. We have these grants, and then we got a couple $100,000 from friends and family. That made them much more interested in investing in it, because they were like, okay, you guys really believe in this. You're committed to it. And you may not care if you lose my money, but I think you'll care if you lose your Uncle Bill's money. You know what I mean? So I think that helped us. Being willing to commit our own money to the company made it a lot easier to raise, but then also having that non-dilutive funding, so that's not just the investors' money that is risk, and you have scientific validation from the SBIR. So that allowed us to raise our seed round of about $1 million, and then a follow-on round this year of a few more $1 million.
How long did it take, Anthony? How long did it take?
It took me a year of hard work, to raise that first. So we had raised a few $100,000 from friends and family, and then we got like about 1.5 on top of that is our first round of investment end of last year in 2019. And then we went through a similar exercise where many of our current investors and a few new investors gave us another tranche of money to support our programs. A lot of that was to expand our pipeline. So we had won our phase 2. We're pushing forward our first product. We got a little more money to support that, and then support our second program, which we just won, or we're very likely to win Fast Track SBIR, support that. And so we have current investors and new investors supporting our second program as well. And so it's about what you're building, what the value inflection points are, and I think your investors kind of start to become your advocate for more investment. Like your current investors, or seeing new investors talking to your current investors, is what allowed us to continue to raise money and expand kind of our pool of private supporters.
Yeah, one thing I'll build on what Anthony was saying is, as an observation, is it certainly helped having him put his own money, skin in the game, as they call it. But I'm sure he used that money wisely, like, just because he didn't want to lose Uncle Bill's money. So he invested that money in those value creating milestones that he was talking about before. So he was achieving, hitting certain milestones, some inflection points that either de-risked the investment in the minds of the next downstream investors, or proved out, like a value of the company that he's. You can always have something in a report, but until you actually prove it on paper and show the evidence, as you collect that evidence, that makes, a lot of people think venture capitalists or, even angel investors love risk, but they're really risk averse, so they want to invest in things that are tried, investments that they can make a return on. That's how they professionally make their money. They earn a return on that capital. That's how they make their money, and that's how their limited partners who invest in the venture capital funds make their money. So As Anthony points out, he used that capital to de-risk the investments. And this non-dilutive capital that MIH invests, which can be substantive in some cases, you can hit a lot of value creating milestones sometimes with, phase 1 grants, phase 2 grants, phase 2B, CRPs. Like you can get down, NIA is an institute, for really risky investments like Alzheimer's disease. They'll invest 10, 20, $30 million into a company to get you further down the value creating path. And then investors would be more comfortable investing the money. So it's all about, I just wanted to point out Anthony's point of, he was raising money, de-risking the investment, proving the value, and then it was a snowball effect where then it attracted more investors, and that he could then reduce more risk, improve more value. And that's how a great story of an entrepreneur is really launched.
Really great story, and we're so proud of our Anthony. We're going to open it up for questions, but before I do, some resources that will also answer one of the questions that we got about company valuation and benchmark for option pools for an employee equity incentives. So that's some fantastic books that you might want to look at that explain things, how things work, and what angels are about and what VCs are all about. So David S. Rose, who I think was one of the founding members of New York Angels, is a founder of at least 2 or 3 companies himself, including Gust, which is an investor platform. Has written a book. I can't remember what it's called. The author's name is David S. Rose. I think it was something like Angel Investing or Angel Deals. I mean, this man is a super angel. He's done hundreds of term sheets. He's invested in hundreds of companies, and it's a very easy read. So that's for angel investing. Angels are usually good for a couple $1 million. Some don't do therapeutics, though. I have to warn you, they like devices, diagnostics, digital health, other healthcare. And then there's another really good book. I think that the people who took the genie out of the bottle in terms of VC investments, Brad Feld and I'm blanking out on his name, but I'll take a look at it. I'll post a link in the chat. They wrote a book called Venture Deals. You can get these from the library. You don't have to pay any money for them. So I'll post both of those into the chat so you could take a look at them. The Angel Capital Association has a wonderful website that has an awful lot of resources, as well as the National Venture Capital Association. A few years ago, they got together, the two of them got together to create a template for a term sheet, even for Series A, Series B, etc., or a seed stage deal. You can see the various kinds of term sheets. Again, when you get into a deal with investors, it's going to be very customized. You're always going to need to have the right kind of attorney, counsel, to be able to tell you like what to look out for, what's an absolute no. But there are things that if you're going to be raising money, you should become familiar with, terms that you should become familiar with, understand what's founder friendly and what is not, understand where the risk areas or where the contentious areas are going to be for your company. So just having an understanding, I think, is good. The general field, don't walk into it blind. So I'll post those into the chat. In the meantime, we're opening it up for Q&A. This is your opportunity to ask us questions about anything related to commercial planning, getting private capital into your company, getting advisors, any other resources you need for your company beyond just cash, or cash and beyond. How's that? Opening it up. We've got about 7 minutes left. We want to hear from you. What's on your mind and what you're struggling with?
And Ethel, while we're waiting, since we spent much of yesterday with SBIRs and all 3 of you are experienced with that, can you give, we'll switch from everything you've been talking about on dilutive back to non-dilutive, and your top tips for submitting successful phase 1 and phase 2 applications, which all 3 of you I know are familiar with. But we'll stop if someone asks a question, but if not, I think that might be helpful.
That's great. John, do you have a couple of tips? Anthony, either one of you.
Yeah, I bet Anthony's probably a better expert on it than I am. But what I would say, even in we raised a ton of venture capital money at my biotech startup, but we also did, apply and receive SBIR fundings as well. It can be really useful to de-risk, especially in some of the more risky projects, even if you're venture capital backed, and how to do it, the tips and tricks. One, work with people who have done it before. I would sort of start to, people who have done this successfully, who really understand the space. You know, people like DHI and others who are grant writing experts, their success rates are much higher. These are competitive grants. So, you know, the typical success rate can be 20-25% for a phase one, but that goes up a lot with, you know, experienced partners. So that's one thing to think about. Two is it's marketing, you know, market positioning. What's the importance? What's the impact of this technology? Why is it different than what's out there in the marketplace? Really, all that research that we talked about earlier, understanding what position this technology will have in the marketplace, having people who are willing to back you with support letters, you know, all these things, and also with the quality of the management team and scientific team that is backing this technology. All those things are things that will make the reviewers more comfortable that this science will have a big impact, that you guys have the team and the facilities to do this in a successful way. So the more homework you have, the more you understand your marketplace, you know, the better off you'll be. But I'll let Anthony answer the question more because I know he has a lot more experience. I'm personally applying for these grants.
Yeah, I mean, you know, look over really carefully what your grant is scored on. Like, I think people don't spend enough time trying to understand that first, because each of those is an independent score, and it's really important.
Those 5 things, do you remember what they are?
You know, I mean, there's the significance, right? The innovation, the research plan, which, you know, undisputably is the most important. It's not supposed to be, but it's the most important for an SBIR. The team, is there anything else? Environment, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So team and environment, if you don't get ones on those, you probably don't have much help for your grant. You know, you really have to make sure you have an environment that can complete the work, you know, and that's you and your academic partners, and the team is the same. You know, you have to have experts that reflect the development plan of your product, right? So phase one, I would say it's maybe not quite as important, that you have thought through all the way downstream and can kind of reflect the team, you know, but I've sat as a reviewer, and I think, and that's another thing I would recommend is volunteer to review. You will learn more about sitting in an NIH
Great idea.
than you ever will submitting 500 SBIR grants. You know, sit and see what happens on the other side of the curtain. And you'll learn a lot. You also make connections probably that'll help you win grants. But you know, one of the easy criticisms is, you know, you're developing a therapeutic and your whole team is chemists and engineers. You don't have anyone as biologist. You don't have anyone that's ever treated a patient with disease. You're treating your therapeutic for you. You kind of got to think about that downstream and make sure your team is reflective of that. And also, you know, for your environment, making sure you have, you know, making sure the facilities can list in the facilities description all of the resources you need to complete your research, your proposed research. It really got to line up. It should just be a box you're checking for the reviewer, and they should be able to give you a 1 or 2 on those right off the bat. And then, yeah, I think the most important thing is that your research plan is well thought out. You have good optional paths if things fail. Your experiments are well described. Your controls are well described. That's where I've always, like, once you get that worked out, and that's where kind of resubmission is often taken, the grant is well received. And it's important because you want to actually be successful in committing the research. And then the significance in the innovations about understanding the marketplace and how your product will be used. And if you can explain that crisply, because they're very short sections, you know, if they're more than a page, you're in trouble because you don't have enough room for the research plan. And so, you know, you really have to, it has to be obvious that you understand what the products are in the marketplace and how your product that you're proposing to develop is going to positively impact patients if it's NIH, positively impact diagnosis, you know, whatever. It depends what your technology does. That's all got to be there, and that's been some significance in innovation.
Great. I will add just a reminder for everyone that your reviewers are primarily academics. So if you're a business person starting this company or running this company, get some kind of a collaborator to help you, because that's going to be part of the team if it's a scientific product regardless, but it's helpful to have an academic collaborator. We got one question in the Q&A. When structuring advisor options agreements, how do you ensure that they are actually going to deliver on their commitment? Is that contractually bound?
Well, just a quick answer to that. I would say that's why you vest, you know, right? Like one is you do the trial period. So you make sure you know them, you make sure how committed they are to the company, you get to know them. So that's the upfront piece. two, it is like a long-term relationship. Like you have to make sure that you work well with them, you can collaborate with them, and you start to assess, like, are they adding value to their company? Are they being helpful, productive, communicative? And that's, if not, both sides can terminate the agreement at any point. And then they would, they'll stop vesting, and the full cost of the options wouldn't occur. So I think it's a nicely set up agreement to make sure that both sides are adding value and supporting each other, and it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree with John. I mean, I don't think you want to be in a position where you're canceling an option agreement with someone who's an expert in the field. And so that's just not good for you. It's not good for them, and that's going to hurt you long term. I think you want to know that by the time you're offering them a piece of your company, that they're the right person to help you. And so that kind of getting to know them and building the relationship before there's an equity piece is really critical, I think.
That's all of this has been great advice. I know we're at the end of the time. There was one other question. Would MCEDC, was just on the last panel, or are there other resources to provide for the legal help that you've recommended a couple times? And usually the economic development groups do not have fund for legal advice. As you might imagine, if they did, it would be used up very quickly by businesses across all sectors. Having said that, periodically there may be some grants. For example, Anthony, I think you received the Montgomery County match. I don't believe that was encumbered. So if you had wanted to use that for IP or option development support, you could have. Is that correct?
There are things you can use it on and things you can't, and legal is one of them. Also, the fee that you can put in an SPR can be used for those kind of legal
the
services.
Technical assistance fee.
Not the technical assistance, but the actual fee. So you have your direct funds, you have your indirect, which is running your business, and then you have your fee, which can be used for. I don't believe it can be used for IP, but I think it can be used for legal, like
organization governance.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Well, we've tried to keep all these panels running on time, and I know you are three very busy folks, so we really appreciate your sharing your time and expertise with everybody today. With your permission, we'll share some of the links that you described in this recording with everyone, not only those on today, but the other 130 folks who are registered, because it was valuable information, and we'll do that within the next 2 weeks.
All right. Wishing everyone good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. On behalf of BioHealth Innovation and Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, we thank you all for joining us for today's programming. Please email bhi@biohealthinnovation.org if you have any questions or challenges with the one-to-one partnering, which will continue this afternoon and all day tomorrow. Thank you very much.